Awesome, awesome. Good morning. I'm excited to be here. This is actually my third visit to Harvard. The first time I came here I was like maybe 25. It's like over 11 years ago, and I was here to actually document a panel that was happening at the law school for my film, Still Black. Kyler Broadus was presenting his research and work, and it was his first time being at Harvard. And it's so weird, this full circle. Now I'm here again, kind of talking about that work. I returned to Harvard in 2014, partnered with the Innovation Lab, and did a trans hack. They were super excited. Harvard was the first school and the only school that we've actually done work, trans hack has actually worked with. And when we reached out to Harvard, they were like, hell yeah, we love the work that you're doing. And I was like, what? So that was really, really cool. And so we spent the whole weekend in the Innovation Lab talking about trans entrepreneurship and trans technology, and the ways that trans people kind of build community by creating technology. So my presentation today is called Making Trans Visible, Media and New Technology. Again, my name is Kortney Ziegler. I am the Director of Research and Design at ZAM Labs. It is a startup that my co-founder and I put together, are building, really focused on creating tools for collaboration, virtual tools. So right now, we're living in a moment, I think, that has been happening kind of for the past few years where trans visibility is really in the mainstream. And it's a really interesting moment because I think a lot of people weren't really or kind of have no idea about transness and trans folks and being trans. And so mainstream media has really brought the representation of different genders into the forefront. We have people like Laverne Cox and Janet Mock who are doing, they're my friends too, who are doing really, really awesome things. And so, but what is happening is people kind of think that, oh, this is like now trans people are telling their stories, which isn't true. We've always been telling our stories. We've been telling our stories through media, through documentation, and really with the kind of advent of the internet. And I really appreciate the last presentation because they mentioned like kind of like 2011, and I'm gonna mention 2011, and it does seem so long ago, but it was like really so much has happened in the past 10 years with online media and how people kind of connect and how people kind of document their own stories. And so we've always been documenting our stories, and I've been documenting my stories. I had started with a blog. It was called Blackademic. It was super popular in the early 2000s. And this was when pre-Twitter, pre-everything, pre-YouTube. Yeah, this is pre-everything. And so I was a young grad student, and grad school was really difficult for me. Really difficult for me. I think it's difficult for all of us, but it was really difficult for me, really kind of finding community in the spaces that I was in. And so I kind of looked toward the internet to build my community, and really just to kind of like do research and work that I wasn't able to do in my seminars. Because I was finding that the things that I wanted to talk about weren't necessarily the things that my colleagues wanted to talk about. And that really made me sad. So I kind of turned into the world of blogging and found so many different amazing people. And that's when I really started telling my story. And it was also really when I really started documenting my own transition. I'm going to out myself. I am a trans man. And so I used the online space to kind of build community with so many kind of people who are popular on Twitter now, who we kind of met, like I said, pre-Twitter, and built this like really amazing kind of scholastic, queer community online that we tackled so many different things. This is like the kind of first iteration. As you see, like, I'm so lonely in grad school. I know, it's so sad, right? I was so lonely in grad school. To now, and then I crossed the line and I became Dr. Ziegler, and I felt like confident, and I completely changed what I would blog about. I was the first graduate at Northwestern, and so like I definitely had a kind of a different kind of leverage I could bring to the blogosphere. But there was also at a time when blogging kind of like started dying out because we have so many different ways of communicating rapidly differently. I also documented my own journey through film. I'm a filmmaker, and I was making films prior to blogging, really short experimental films, feel inspired by, I apologize, I'm also like really tired, and I was sick yesterday, so if I stumble a lot. I was really inspired by filmmakers like Isaac Julian and Cheryl Dunye, and all these queer filmmakers who are really kind of tackling different kinds of ways of representing queer bodies. It was the first time when I was I went to college and got my degree in film studies and film production, and it was the first time that I was like, oh wait, there's like people who are making films with people who were like me in it. And that radically changed my world, and I was like, I want to do the same thing. And so I did, and I used myself as I use myself as a subject in a lot of my films, and really exploring kind of gender and sexuality and my transition. The last film that I made was Still Black, a portrait of Black trans men, and I started writing it maybe in 2004, as I started to be like, I'm going to medically transition myself. And so for me, it was kind of like a research project, because I was like, well, if I do this, what's going to be the outcome? What am I going to look like? Who am I going to meet that I'm going to feel comfortable with, or what's going to happen? Is all this uncertainty. And so I was seeking out other Black trans men, and I couldn't find them. And I'm going to talk about that in the next slide, why I couldn't find them. And so I was like, well, I want to change that. And so during grad school, it was the winter of my break. I was doing my exams, and I did my exams, and also started trying to find other Black trans men through my blog, because my blog was super popular. And so I put a call in the blog, and I was just like, I'm looking for people who identify as Black transgender males, because I want to do this film. Got so many emails around. Got so many emails and messages from folks who are like, oh my God, I've been waiting to tell my story. Is this real? You really want to, document us? And at the time, I didn't look the way that I did. And so I had to kind of build this relationship online in a ways that is very different, because we didn't have social media. And it literally, less than a decade ago, so wild. The different kind of modes of communication. So I made Still Black, and it was released in 2008. Continues to be the only film about Black trans men. People don't even think about Black trans men when we talk about trans, because certain identities are centered when we think about trans, and especially, like I said, in this moment, in this mainstream media moment, where trans people don't necessarily have control of the narratives in the mainstream, and so a certain kind of transness is represented. So I say that to say that I think that Still Black is still ahead of its time. And it turns 10 at the end of the year. You can buy it, stillblackfilm.org, buy it at Harvard, buy it for your department. It's serious, it's still taught in schools, it's still screened, it's screening at three universities this year. It's screened in India last month. It still travels the world, this text, this document, which is super awesome. After I kind of made that film, and started working on that film, it was also at the same time where the internet was shifting. It was moving from a text-based medium to a video-based medium, and YouTube was born, 2005. It seems so, yeah, it's when I think about 2005, I'm like, wow, that's not even that far away, but the technology has shifted so much. We have everything in our hands now. But what was interesting with YouTube is that it kind of became the center of this archive of trans identities. I know when I was looking for Black trans men for Still Black, I had my blog and I put the call out, and then I also kind of looked towards YouTube, and there weren't, how many men did I see? Or young boys. Black trans people weren't really kind of represented on YouTube, and it was kind of this democratizing of representation in YouTube, because anybody could if you had internet, you could just sign up for a YouTube account. I actually don't know how YouTube is now, but you can sign up for a YouTube account and just start recording videos. And so a lot of trans folks would do that, would tag the videos, and a lot of other trans folks would start posting video responses, showing off surgeries, telling each other how they got the documents they got. So it became this really interesting space of this exchange of information that you really can't get anywhere else about how to be trans. is definitely where I went and figured out everything about my identity right now. And it was actually funny from like people who are way younger than me. And I was like, how did you figure that out? And I'm in a PhD program and I can't, you know, so it was, so YouTube really changed how trans people connected and how we represented ourselves and how we defined ourselves. Because we were absent in media at that time, it made us very visible and having some control. As YouTube evolved, the control of our image has like kind of shifted because, you know, the internet's nasty, there are trolls, there are people who just live to just hate and, you know, want to post like awful things online, and so it's not always a safe space, YouTube. Google Hangouts came out after like, I want to say maybe 4 to 5 years after YouTube was established. It was acquired by Google, and Google kind of like shifted it and was like, okay, it's not just now one person who can record a video, we can bring in other people. And so a lot of trans folks, including myself, would use Google Hangouts to go beyond just the single testimonial that we were doing before, but to have these kind of cross-cultural critical discussions, and to create our own shows, talking about our lives. And again, and everything was still centered around, like, this is how you be trans, this is how I'm trans, this is how you get these documents, this is how you do these things, this is what's happening in my life. And I think that's really super amazing, again, to really think about in this moment where we don't know. I think if you're not a trans person, and you are observing what it is to be trans via the mainstream media, you would assume that we don't connect with each other, that we don't talk to each other, that we don't know one another. And that's not the case, because we've been knowing one another and building community prior to the times we were on television through the internet. Me as a filmmaker, myself as a filmmaker, I really loved, like I said, YouTube and like this really kind of democratization of media. And then it was also, you know, the years started going by, then the iPhone came out. And then we were able to put our cameras in our hand and like leave our desktop and document our lives in so many different ways. You know, this roaming like kind of like archive that we were able to create. I started using my iPhone to kind of do these really short films and documenting trans people, to upload it back to YouTube, because that's where all the traffic is, to really kind of provide a different perspective to trans people. So I moved away from Black trans men and just started documenting all types of trans people, specifically trans technologists, because that's the field that I'm in now. But trans folks are just across backgrounds, because there's still this growing archive that so many of us are contributing to. And I appreciate, again, the last talk, because everything was happening around the same timeline, and there's all these different folks who are adding to this trans, genderqueer, non-binary identity via social media, and it's such a rich space for someone to study. Sometimes I wish I was back in school, because I would not ever go back to school. Sometimes I wish I was, yeah, right, yeah. Sometimes I wish I was back in school so that, you know, like if I've had it again, I would probably do some significant research in that space, and how trans people have really, I think, afforded other identities to use online media to make community. Oh, have you all seen Tangerine? It's an excellent film. I highly recommend it. Please watch it. It was all shot on an iPhone. It's about Black trans women in LA. It's like a comedy drama film, shot in 72 hours. Beautiful. I watched it and I was like, oh my God, I screw tech. I want to go back to filmmaking, because, like, you know, I was inspired. I have not, but it really shifted how we talk about trans people, and what it means to be able to create something that is beautiful and can travel and be watched by different folks through something as small as the iPhone. Tangerine and Still Black. So then, as time has kind of progressed, and online media is kind of bringing trans people together, we have on-site spaces and technology that are really kind of witnessing this kind of like social, that are really kind of like witnessing what's happening in the online space and kind of want to translate that into on-site spaces. And so right now, in 2011, we started seeing tech companies and tech spaces kind of have these hackathons for good. And I don't know if anyone isn't familiar with a hackathon, but it is an event where folks come together. Originally started where software engineers and different kinds of developers would come together, but it kind of expanded into people who don't code, who are artists, who are community members, who provide different kind of background and input, and come together and develop new technology. So you saw Foursquare kind of use their location-based technology to kind of build off of that, where people can meet each other offline and in person. The government started doing civic hacks, where people are using the open data from the city to improve our resources, which is very interesting. We also saw NASA use different kind of different spaces of hackathons to really bolster the work that they were doing by tapping into citizens. And then you have Trans H4CK, which is what I founded in 2013, which is the first hackathon and tech space dedicated specifically to trans and gender nonconforming folks. It was born as a response to you can see this little infographic here. I'm not going to go over the stats, all these stats, but for myself, I had a really difficult time finding employment after I completed my PhD, even though I had produced an amazing body of work, scholastically and creatively. And I attribute a lot of that to anti-trans discrimination, racism, and so all these intersecting kind of biases being in this body that I was experiencing really had a difficult time. I had a really difficult time kind of sustaining my own life. I had a deep depression, but I've always been technical, and so it's always been the space where I felt well, if anything kind of fails, I can always go to YouTube and be inspired, because there's always a trans person who's my life sucks, but I'm still here. You could still be here. We encounter these issues, these moments in our life where folks aren't going to want to work with us or do certain things because we're out and we're visible. And so me returning back to that space really inspired me to be well, how can we then build upon that? And so I designed Trans H4CK to, again, address those social issues, and then create a space where trans people can meet in person, outside of online, and create new technology for other trans folks to connect. So that happened in 2013. We launched about 40 apps were built at our first hackathon. No, 40 people participated, about 8 apps were built. Apps such as a location-based restroom finder, a location-based service where you can kind of rate if an establishment is trans-friendly, like a Yelp for trans people kind of. A clothing exchange program where people who are transitioning, who want to represent themselves in a certain way, can exchange clothes with people who don't want to represent themselves in a certain way. So it's all of these really amazing kind of ideas that were developed in 2.5 days by trans people who were developers, software engineers, artists, community members, just regular folks in the city of Oakland. So Trans H4CK eventually kind of exploded because there was nothing else, and people were super excited about the possibilities. And I only thought there was going to be one event. I was this is going to be the one time, because I'm doing this because, well, I need to try to figure something out to make money so I don't lose my house. And also something that I feel that can benefit other trans folks. And I think that a lot of the work that I've done and everything in my life thus far is always kind of well, I want to sustain myself, but I also want to figure out how can I scale that and support other people. So then the next year we came to Harvard, and that was really, like I said, that was really cool. It was a great experience because we got to talk about how trans people, definitely how trans people are innovative, but how trans people have impacted technology in certain ways, and how we really support one another and sustain our communities and have these critical discussions online, but bringing it into the academy, which I've experienced discrimination, and a lot of other folks have experienced discrimination. I actually want to just go over these pictures. The first picture was, first bottom left, was the first event, and again, I brought in the YouTube, because that's where it started. and Janet Mock was our guest. And everybody was so excited because, you know, she's famous, and we're regular folks. And so it gave people an opportunity to meet Janet Mock in person, and she answered questions. She talked about, I invited her because she started a hashtag on Twitter, Girls Like Us. And when I think of technology, I think of how, not only how we build it, but how we use it. And trans people were doing videos, and when the advent of Twitter came, it's text-based. How do we identify ourselves? How do we build community through the hashtag? And so Janet Mock launched Girls Like Us for trans women to locate one another on Twitter. And because most technologies now are using hashtags to kind of categorize things, that hashtag spilled over into YouTube, and so now YouTube and spaces like that use Girls Like Us. 1 minute, okay, how to scale collaboration models, that's that. So then, with that, Trans Hack has now developed our own technology from the experience and the history of YouTube. So we have built a virtual education collaboration space that we use video and other collaboration tools for trans people to connect and build technology, share information, show the work that they're doing, show the products that they're building, and it's not in an unsafe space such as YouTube, which it has become. This is all a space that is private, only accessible if you have access to it. So we really want to focus on kind of taking the history of how trans people have communicated virtually and making it very different. Yes, so we own the narrative and content, and we own how we represent ourselves. Was it Friday? Was International Trans Day of Visibility. We held a panel about being Black and trans in the US. It was screened globally from the Loft in Berlin and different places throughout the world. I was in my house in Oakland, California, and all the panelists were in different parts of the country. And all the viewers were from different parts of the world. And it's amazing that from a hackathon, we've gone to building technology to kind of rivaling, and we're not trying to become YouTube or Google, but rivaling the spaces in which have made it safer on trans people, and kind of made it safe, and now we have had a global reach by scaling in that capacity. We also held a virtual conference. I'm trying to rush really quick. We held a virtual conference, and we're having one again August 28th, where trans technologists kind of demo their products, and it's the first trans tech conference in tech. And so it's super cool to kind of be at the forefront of the social justice movement in technology, but also providing visibility and creating jobs for trans people. This is how you can support, stay connected, get engaged. Hello at Trans Hack. And this is, I'm just gonna show you a quick. As you see, I am broadcasting live. The two participants are definitely my co-founder, and so thank you. I'm available for questions, and I apologize if I rushed through this, but.